Hello and welcome. Today I'll introduce one of Japan's legendary racehorses, Narita Brian. On May 3rd, 1991, at Hayata Farm's Nikapu branch in Hokkaido, a colt was born who would later be known as the monster with the shadow roll. Narita Brian. His sire was Brian's Time, imported from the United States, while his dam was Pacificus, a mare purchased by Hayata Farm at a sales auction in England. Just the year before, Pacificus had already produced Narita Brian's half-brother, Biwa Hayahide. In his early days, Narita Brian was not regarded as particularly outstanding. However, as training progressed, his extraordinary physical abilities began to draw attention. The staff who worked with him in the initial stages recalled his spring, suppleness of the back, and agility far surpassed those of his brother, Biwa Hayahide. There is also an anecdote that even after repeatedly running up and down the slope, Narita Brian was the only horse whose breathing never faltered. At the same time, he also displayed a timid side. For instance, he once threw off his rider after being startled by a puddle. Eventually, through a private sale, he came under the ownership of Hidenori Yamaji and was placed in the care of trainer Okubo. In fact, it was Okubo who, upon learning of Narita Brian through an intermediary, recommended the purchase to Yamaji. Okubo later reflected, if Biwa Hayahide had risen to prominence earlier, Narita Brian probably would never have come to my stable. The purchase price is said to have been around 23 million yen. On May 13, 1993, Narita Brian passed the JRA's physical inspection, and 6 days later he entered the Rito training center under Okubo's stable. His main jockey was assigned as Katsumi Minai. According to Minai, when Okubo asked him, "Have you ever won the derby?" he answered, "Not yet." To which Okubo replied, "Then win it with this horse." When Minai first rode Narita Brian, he immediately felt something extraordinary. "This horse is different from the others. The driving force when he shifted gears gave me the same sensation I had when riding Oguri Cap," he said, recognizing from the very first ride that Narita Brian possessed exceptional talent. From here, let us turn to his races. At that time in Japan, horse ages were still counted by the traditional system, so the names of races used the terminology of that era. In other words, what we now call 2-year-olds were referred to as 3-year-olds back then. This detail is not crucial for enjoying the video, but I wanted to provide this explanation for clarity. Now back to the story. On August 15, 1993, Narita Brian made his debut in a maiden race over 1,200 meters at Hakodate Racecourse, run on heavy ground. Hard as it may be to believe in hindsight, he was only the second favorite on that day. His elder brother Biwa Hayahide was already active in the classic races, so Brian drew attention largely as Biwa Hayahide's younger brother. As the race began, Narita Brian settled in mid-pack. Coming around the final corner, he drew up alongside the frontrunner, Long Unicorn. It seemed certain that he would seize the lead in the stretch, but Long Unicorn pulled away once more, leaving Brian a length behind. The gap remained to the finish, and Narita Brian had to settle for second place in his first start. His first victory came 2 weeks later, again at Hakodate, under the same conditions. 1,200 meters on heavy ground. This time, he went straight to the front after the break and never relinquished the lead. Entering the stretch, he continued to widen the gap, pulling away to win by 9 lengths in commanding fashion. It was an emphatic performance, and in his next start, the Hakodate Sansai Stakes, G3, he was backed as the second favorite. Once again, it was the same 1,200 meters at Hakodate on heavy turf. Brian ran from mid-pack, swinging wide to launch his rally in the stretch, but he could not close the gap and finished 6th, 0.8 seconds behind the winner, Marie God. 1 month later, Narita Brian traveled to Fukushima for the Kinmokusei Tokubetsu, a race for horses with one prior win. Unlike his earlier starts, this race was contested over 1,700 meters. He settled comfortably in a forward position, then seized the lead around the final turn. In the stretch, he opened up a 3-length advantage, winning with ease. The gap between the second and third place finishers was another 9 lengths, making his victory all the more impressive. 2 weeks later, he stepped up to graded company in the daily High Sansai Stakes, G2. This time, he was held toward the rear of the field. Even in the stretch, he was still near the back, but weaving through traffic, he finally produced a late run. Still, all he could manage was to snatch third place at the wire. 3 weeks later, Narita Brian reappeared in the open-class Kyoto Sansai Stakes. On his nose was something new, white and conspicuous. It was the shadow roll. Today, Narita Brian is almost synonymous with the shadow roll, but this was the very first time he wore it. Trainer Okubo had judged that Brian's timid nature and tendency to be distracted by his own shadow kept him from focusing on his running. From this race onward, with the shadow roll fitted, his way of running seemed transformed. The once light and floating manner was gone. Instead, he carried himself with the grounded presence of a predator, like a carnivore or even a heavy tank. In this 1,800-meter contest, Narita Brian won by 3 lengths, stopping the clock in an impressive 1 minute 47.8 seconds. Then in December, he lined up for the Asahi High Sansai Stakes, G1, the championship race for 3-year-olds. Backed as the overwhelming favorite, Brian traveled quietly on the rail in mid-pack for much of the race. But as they swung into the final corner, he surged forward to challenge the leaders. In the stretch, he powered away from his rivals, opening up 3.5 lengths at the wire. It was a decisive victory, one that left no doubt in awarding him the title of best 3-year-old colt of the season. Yet by this point, Narita Brian had already raced 7 times. Don't you think that's a lot? By the standards of modern champions, I would argue it was excessive. The reason lay in his temperament. Narita Brian was naturally high-strung, and as race day approached, he would become even more excitable. Trainer Okubo entered him frequently to help burn off that excess energy. Okubo was known for this style of management, though it would later spark controversy. But that is a story for later. In 1994, Narita Brian entered his 4-year-old season, equivalent to today's 3-year-old campaign. His first race of the year was the Kyoto Yushun High Yonsai Stakes. Trainer Okubo deliberately chose this race to give Brian early experience on the turf course at Tokyo Racecourse, with an eye toward the upcoming Japanese derby. Narita Brian settled calmly in mid-pack before advancing smoothly into the stretch. As soon as they straightened for home, he loomed alongside the leaders and then effortlessly drew away to the finish. He won by 4 lengths, a commanding start to his new season. Adding to the sense of occasion, just 1 day earlier, his half-brother Biwa Hayahaide had captured the Kyoto Kinen. The siblings' back-to-back graded victories created a wave of excitement among racing fans. After his emphatic triumph in the Kyoto Tsushin High, Okubo decided to point Brian toward the first jewel of the Triple Crown, the Satsuki Sho, via the Spring Stakes, G2. This was in line with his philosophy of running Brian frequently to help temper his excitable nature and foster composure through real race experience. In the Spring Stakes, Narita Brian dropped back to the rear early on. But sweeping into the 3rd corner, he unleashed a powerful move, surging up to join the leaders. From there, he simply powered away, winning by 3.5 lengths. By this point, whispers had already begun among fans. Perhaps a new Triple Crown champion was on the horizon. And then came the main event, the Satsuki Sho. Narita Brian entered as the overwhelming favorite, sent off at odds of 1.6 with a massive 49.8% of all win tickets backing him. In the race, he tracked calmly just behind the leading group, saving ground along the rail. By the 3rd corner, he was already up into 4th place. Swinging out wide into the stretch, he accelerated smoothly, and with 200 meters to go, he powered clear. Treating his rivals as if they were children, he drew away to win by 3.5 lengths. His final time was 1 minute 59.0, shattering the course record by half a second. With this, he extended his winning streak to 5 and claimed the first jewel of the Triple Crown. In the following Japanese derby, expectations rose even higher. He started as the shortest-priced favorite in history at the time, at odds of 1.2, with an extraordinary 61.8% of the betting support. Settling slightly ahead of mid-pack, Narita Brian traveled behind a brisk pace, 1,000 meters in 59.0 seconds. Moving forward with a sweeping run, he shifted outward in the stretch, even drifting diagonally across the track, but unleashed a devastating burst of speed. The performance was nothing short of spectacular. He stormed home by 5 lengths, securing the second crown in commanding fashion. For jockey Katsumi Minai, now 41 years old, the victory carried a special meaning. As promised to trainer Okubo, he finally achieved his lifelong dream of becoming a Derby-winning jockey. After his triumph in the Japanese Derby, Narita Brian spent the summer in Hokkaido. He stayed at Sapporo and Hakodate racecourses, where his connections made special arrangements to manage him directly, combining training with respite from the summer heat. In September, he made a public appearance in the paddock at Hakodate, drawing enormous attention from fans. Behind the scenes, however, he was struggling. The summer heat had taken its toll, and he was showing signs of summer fatigue. Trainer Okubo later admitted, "At one point, I even considered skipping the Kikka Sho." His preparations had indeed been delayed. Narita Brian's first race of the autumn was the Kyoto Shimbun High, a trial for the Kikka Sho. He went off as the overwhelming favorite at odds of 1.0, carrying an astonishing 77.8% of the win bets. Yet many observers warned, if he's ever going to lose, it will be this race, as concerns lingered about his fitness. As usual, Brian circled wide into the final turn to range up alongside the leaders. But in the stretch, his trademark acceleration was missing. Though he briefly took the lead, he was caught by Starman and had to settle for second place. Still, the run was said to have brought him back to peak condition in time for the main event. In the Kikka Sho itself, Narita Brian was once again the top choice, backed as the 1.7 favorite. The race unfolded with Steel Cast sprinting far ahead of the field, stringing the pack into a long line from front to back. Brian bided his time right in the middle of the group. Steel Cast, notably, was the son of Pretty Cast, a mare who had once stolen the Tenno Sho with a daring front-running victory, a memory that older fans recalled vividly. Behind Brian stalked his old rival Starman and the Derby runner-up Air Dublin. Even past the 600-metre pole, Steel Cast still held a 10-length advantage, but he inevitably ran out of stamina. Entering the home stretch, he was swallowed by the pack in an instant. With 200 meters remaining, Narita Brian surged to the front, and from there he only widened the gap. His mud-spattered shadow roll swung as he powered away, crossing the line 7 lengths clear. Japan had its 5th Triple Crown winner. Despite the ground being rated slightly heavy, he stopped the clock in 3 minutes 4.6 seconds. Breaking the record his brother Biwa Hayahaide had set the year before by 1/10 of a second. That concludes this chapter. Narita Brian has risen as an unstoppable force, seizing the Triple Crown with overwhelming power. But what destiny awaits him beyond this triumph? The story continues in the next part. I've also started channel memberships. There aren't many perks, but if you enjoy this channel and simply want to support it, feel free to join. Thank you.